Here we go.
Oh,
Hello
right.
and welcome to the O3C podcast, coming to you from O3C Towers, O3C Games. My name is Jonathan Dunn, and I'm joined in my tower by Mr Dow.
Yep. It's been such a long time, I didn't know what I was supposed to say.
You're not supposed to say anything, you're just supposed to be you. And we're talking about video games. That'll do. Right, you're doing the announcements.
Okay. I didn't write anything.
No.
What are we announcing?
I don't know.
I'll say something.
Open Patreon. Open Discord, Patreon.
Newsletter.
The newsletter straight away.
Right. Hey. Even if we haven't been here that regularly as of late, we've still been keeping all of our lovely fans out in the world updated via our newsletter, which, if you haven't signed up already, can be done so at o3c.games. It will literally cost you your email address, and we promise, the O3C promise, not to send you any old horse shit. Just little updates about what we're playing each week, some thoughts about what might be going on in the world of games or otherwise, and a couple links to maybe an old episode, old thing on YouTube, old bits and bob that we might have written on the website at a previous time. Also, you can hang out with all of us. That's us and our extended O3C family in the now open public Discord. For a long while, that was Patreon exclusive, but as we've moved to a slightly different format this season, we decided it was time to let everyone into the garden to have a little play. We've got a swing up. There's a nice little swing set now. There's a slide. Gets a bit mucky sometimes, but we do our best to keep it clean. And you can just have a chat with us. You can have a chat with people that liked us enough to pay into the show previously, and people that now want us to just hang out and see what we're up to. It's a good time to be had by all. If you would still like to support us financially via Patreon, you can do so. As we've mentioned in previous shows, we've adapted our pricing tiers slightly, so there aren't any specific perks you'll be paying in for, except for the feeling that comes with knowing that you're helping us continue to do something that we love and hopefully you quite enjoy as well.
I'll do.
Is that right?
Yeah, why not? Why the fuck not? Okay.
Cheers.
Well done. Cheers. Thanks. Hello and welcome back to our new format O3C podcast. We have had a heck of a break, and we hope that everyone listening has had a good summer. We hope that you've been enjoying our newsletter content over this break. If you're not subscribed, head over to o3c.games. Do that immediately, because there's a lot of great content coming at your inboxes every week now, and it's excellent. Also, while you're there, click the link to join us in the O3C Discord to chat with us, because that's also a wonderful venue to fill the void left in between our new monthly episodes. I forgot I'd already written
You're
this.
such a prick. You did that on purpose.
I honestly didn't. I honestly didn't.
No.
It's literally as I was reading this, I realised I wrote these notes like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, that's
fuck, I wasn't. Yeah. Because also, if you hadn't noticed, I've been putting together a walloping great big spoiler special bonus sub-series with friend of the podcast, Casper Meyrowitz, covering every single little bit of Tears of the Kingdom. So between all of that, I think you're actually now getting more content than you were at the times of weekly episodes. My workload has certainly increased, so well done me for excellent management there. Anyway, I am thrilled to be back with Chris for these monthly episodes where we will be catching you up on our recent gaming activity, chatting about any current gaming news and hot topics. But yeah, Chris, how are you?
I'm good. I should feel more rested after a big summer, but I feel quite tired because we're now catching up after a few days back at the grindstone, as it were, at school.
Oh, yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly you forget that you had a summer when you're thrown right into the deep end at the start of a new term. But I'll survive, and give me a week or two and I'll be a bit more level and just feeling quite highly strung for this first few days. How are you?
I'm all right. Like it's been a fun summer. Done lots of work, done lots of stuff. Tackled potty training with my daughter. That's
how's that going?
I've finally stopped shitting myself. So
and she's very proud.
She's very proud. She's very proud of me. She's given me lots of star stickers. So yeah, Yeah, done very well there. So thank you for asking. To kick things off for this first episode back, basically what we've done is we've picked 5 games to talk about each in this episode that have kept us occupied over the last couple of months. I've basically only got 5 games to talk about because of the many hundreds of hours I've poured into Zelda. And obviously, I'm not going to talk about Tears of the Kingdom because I'm dedicating about 1 billion hours of the spoiler specials, 1 billion hours of the spoiler special episodes to that. But I did clock about 220 hours on the game before I was satisfied to put it down. I mean, I say satisfied. I wasn't really, because even though I'd rinsed the game of pretty much everything, I wanted more. So I decided to dive straight into a fresh playthrough of Breath of the Wild on Master Mode, which I'd never done.
Silly.
Well, I hadn't actually returned to Breath of the Wild since I'd put that down about 7 years ago, and I was sort of under the impression that the advancements made in Tears of the Kingdom would kind of make Breath of the Wild a bit redundant, but then also thinking about going back to the simplicity of Breath of the Wild after the, frankly, overwhelming creative playground of Tears of the Kingdom.
Yeah.
That actually appealed to me. And couple that with the added restrictions of playing in Master Mode, where everything is a lot harder. You have to really slow yourself down, consider every move you make. That it kind of felt like exactly what I wanted after, literally being able to do anything in Tears of the Kingdom. And I wasn't sure if I was embarking on a full playthrough of Breath of the Wild. I was fairly content to play as much as I wanted, but fucking hell. That is a game that not only stands up after 7 years, but also totally retains all validity as a game in its own right, even in the shadow of Tears of the Kingdom. And playing Master Mode, it really did give me an entirely new way of approaching the game because, everything is so much harder. The enemies are all a colour rank higher by default, and they hit harder. Your weapons hit softer, break more easily, and also enemies' health regenerates if you leave them alone, so slow and steady doesn't always work as well. You have to think so carefully about every single move and attack and encounter, especially in the early stages of the game. And even though your progress is significantly slower than it would be playing it on normal mode or playing it with the endless toy box of abilities in Tears of the Kingdom, because you are so hyper focused on every aspect of the game, it might be slow, but it's never dull. And I found myself just keeping playing and playing and playing, and I did come up against a fairly sizable roadblock at one point that I thought might see me cave, and that was playing the DLC content from Breath of the Wild, especially the Trial of the Sword challenge, which sees you stripped of all items, weapons, armour, and your champion abilities. It puts you through an ever-increasingly dangerous gauntlet of floors, and you have to scavenge and scheme and steal and strike your way through with just the barest of bare minima, and it's an absolute bitch. I ended up trawling through online guides and video walkthroughs to pick up various tips of how to approach certain problem floors. But to be honest, it was actually only because there's 3 sets of trials that you do: beginner, middle, and final trials. And it was only really the beginner trials that were the issue. The second 2 sets are significantly more generous with what they give you to work with, but the beginner trials see you given, they give you tree branches and pieces of shit, and the enemies are blue rank enemies to start off with, so they've got a lot of health, they hit very hard. And because of the health regeneration thing as well, you can easily find yourself almost killing an enemy, and then your weapon breaks and you have to retreat, find another one, only to see their health fill back up, and then you're basically fucked because you don't have enough weapon. Yeah. So liberal use of your bomb rune abilities was the trick there, and careful constant aim, but it wasn't fun. I'll be honest, it wasn't fun. But so many people online said that the beginner ones were the hardest, and then it starts to become hard but fun. And thankfully, they were right, because once I'd got the beginner trials out of the way, I had a real blast taking on, the harder, in inverted commas, trials. And you're really rewarded for beating them by having your fully powered up Master Sword. That's like your reward for getting through them, which has got increased durability and attack power. And I really needed that for taking on the Champions Ballad DLC content, which is also hard as nails, but the reward for getting that is the Master Cycle motorbike, which was just insanely fun to use, whilst I then whizzed around the world, mopping up all of the shrines and additional bits before taking on Calamity Ganon and having just a phenomenal time. Because, like, the downside of how amazing the Master Cycle was in the original time I got it in the DLC was it was the last thing I got in the entire game, so I didn't have any use for it, other than to ride it from where I got it to the end. But this time, yeah, basically, it was pop a wheelie. So it was great to actually take it for a proper run out. But yeah, it was amazing. So yeah, if anyone is thinking that now Tears of the Kingdom is in their lives, they don't need to play Breath of the Wild, I'd certainly say that that isn't the case. And there are even certain things that I think Breath of the Wild does better than Tears of the Kingdom, and me and Casper will be discussing those in the Tears of the Kingdom spoiler specials as well, so stay tuned for further thoughts on that in that sub-series. But yeah, that's alright. I'm rinsed of Zelda talk for now. What have you played?
For a first game, I don't think I could have picked anything more contrasting to your second 200 plus hour playthrough of Breath of the Wild.
Ridiculous.
Anyone who has read an issue of our newsletter over the last few months will know that I've been playing a game called Daily Dadish. Well, daily, for quite a while now.
Yeah.
The original Dadish trilogy, I've mentioned on here in passing before. They're great little bite-sized platform games that use a kind of thick outline Game Boy Advance aesthetic, and it's really nice. I've beaten the first two games 100%. Before I'd even got in the zone to tackle the third one that's been on my Switch for a while, Daily Dadish, which I guess is the fourth spin-off game, you could say, saw a really big, deep discount. And I thought, I'll pick that up and give it a go. In Daily Dadish, instead of the game being made up of, say, 50-odd levels that you can blast through at your own pace, this is comprised of 365 handcrafted levels, but the catch is that you can only play one a day. And the rest of the game's community are locked into the same stage choice. So therefore you're kind of competing globally across the game's console and PC versions to try and take the top spot in time for whatever the particular map is. If you want to ignore the leaderboards completely, there's also an in-game bronze, silver, gold and star time to aim for, so you don't have to engage with the online stuff at all. If you beat that top time, you earn a little star that can be spent in the in-game store to unlock different characters, and I've quite enjoyed doing that. And in a nice bit of synergy, I unlocked the final character this morning. Literally this morning.
Well done.
And thus have decided, for all intents and purposes, that the game has been beaten for me. Like, I've unlocked everything. I could go, another 150 days if I wanted to see new levels. But as soon as I'd missed one day in that chain, as I've been playing it for the last few months, I knew I was not going to commit to beating all 365. As to try and wait a full year to catch the level I missed felt a bit galling. And I don't think it even logs like which ones you've done and not done, outside of saying, you're on a streak of 10 sort of thing. When I first started playing the game, I was a bit frustrated that I could only do a stage at a time. But after a few days, something sort of shifted in my brain, and instead of being an annoyance that I couldn't play more, it started just to feel like a nice cap to each play session, because it was then a bit of a ritual to kind of beat the stage, look at the leaderboard see if I thought I could compete and maybe play for 15, 20 minutes more, and then just be able to move on. There was no obligation to do anything else. And that was really useful, because I found for the last few months, really, getting properly involved in any games quite difficult. I don't know why. Like, I've just had a weird brain thing for a while. I found it quite hard to spend the time. Maybe, but it's been quite hard. It's been quite hard to just be involved in stuff that I'd normally find quite easy.
Yeah.
To the point where my legendary streak of 52 beaten games a year is probably going to falter this year, because I'm way off the pace.
You need to catch up, because this is the first year I'm attempting to do that as well. But I want to do a special at the end of the year where we talk about the 52 games we've completed.
We'll see how we go. I'm on about 20 on. That's not very good for like 8 months in. But Daily Dadish actually really helped me continue to feel connected to games, even if a week passed and I'd barely played anything else of note, because I was still doing something and chipping away at that and making a little bit of progress. It's just a really nice platform game. Like all of the games in the series I really enjoy. They control well, they feel good. And I did really enjoy the sort of time trial push the leaderboard provided. You know, I've said before, I enjoy racing games where I can just get mildly better with each lap. And that kind of felt like that, to shave half a second off my time each time. Some days, if the level was a bit tough, I'd be happy to just get my star and then leave. Other days, I'd spend what is, in essence, a wasted half hour trying to crack the top 10. But it was something nice to do. On one level, on one day, I managed to take the top spot, if only for an hour or so. But it did help that I was playing that stage at about 5 a.m. and clearly most of the Dadish diehards had yet to wake up because I wasn't in first place when I came back to it in the afternoon. I've particularly enjoyed the way the game often serves levels that lean into the quirks of its own platforming engine. So sometimes I'd finish a stage, I'd get my star time, and then I'd look at the leaderboard and see that some people were like 15 seconds quicker than me. And rather than just going, oh, well, I'll give it up, if I was in the right mood, I found it almost impossible not to want to try and find the exploits that they must have used.
Yeah.
So, you know, it could be a really carefully timed double jump that meant you could sequence break, having to collect a key because you could get over a platform or something. Or I realised if you slightly hesitate before you start a stage, you can manipulate the game's global timer because everything's moving in the background before you start, kind of thing. So you could maybe get a more forgiving configuration that made it slightly quicker to just blast through. I'd never have the patience to get into speedrunning a huge game where at any stage a whole run could just fall apart because you press jump like a 60th of a second too late. But I feel like Dadish is serving some of that precision with way less of the time investment. So I liked feeling like, oh, competing, getting better. But it took me a minute to do a run as opposed to 2.5 hours of Mario 64 to fall off a ledge and be like, well, that was a waste of a night. But yeah, Dadish, they're all cool games. I would highly recommend them. And you can play, I think, most of them for free in browser somewhere. I'm sure I looked last time I mentioned this, that they're all online. I should have looked it up again, but I didn't. No due diligence here.
Cut that out. Right. Where are we? I definitely remember. There it is. I was going to say, I remember cutting out the Dadish sprite at some point, and I need it for the art.
I was just ready to go.
Yeah. Where are we? Here we go. Right. So I didn't really anticipate how much Zelda I was going to be playing when I pre-ordered Diablo 4. And I even pre-ordered the digital deluxe edition, which allowed me to play the game a few days early. And it sat there for several weeks until I was done with Tears of the Kingdom. And then several weeks more until I was done with Breath of the Wild. And even now, I'm struggling to find proper sit-down PS5 console time.
Yeah.
But I have managed to get it installed and working on the Steam Deck as well. So I'm hopeful that it'll get, you know, more playtime soon. But I have made a decent start on it, and it's brilliant. Like, the story is insanely epic and dark and gnarly. And the opening cinematic alone is so tantalising that you just want to get straight into the nitty-gritty of the game and see what horrors await you. Gameplay-wise, it's exactly what I remember from Diablo 3, which is absolutely superb. It's fluid, flexible, and satisfying. I'm currently experimenting with my barbarian character's build all the time, trying out different weapons and combinations of abilities to find, you know, what's going to work for my playstyle. It's just great. One of the major differences in this game over previous Diablo games is that they've sort of done away with the procedurally generated maps in favour of like a designed world map and dungeons, which I really like in the most part because you can keep track of where you've been and which areas you've mapped, and it gives the world just like a much more real, tangible, grounded sense to it. But I will say that the graphical design of the world still looks like it's being procedurally generated with like repeated tile-like sections and stuff like that, which is fine because I mean it all looks great. But I don't know, I was expecting just a bit more from that side of things. I think with this. So yeah, the areas do tend to get just a bit samey, which doesn't really matter when they're randomly generated, but when you're then going back through exactly the same again, it does sort of lose its impact slightly. But there's also the seasonal content to come as well, and I don't even know how that works this time round. I can't even remember how it worked in Diablo 3, because I did play a few seasons worth of that, even though I came to Diablo 3 really late. I started season 12 or something, but you don't need to play all of them. You just, they're kind of in and of themselves. And the first season of content has now started, and I think it runs till the end of October, so I'm hoping to be able to finish the main campaign and give the seasonal content a whirl before then, the next season arrives, because yeah, I enjoyed that, and it was nice to sort of have it felt like it was rolling out at a decent rate, that you didn't feel like you were rushing, but it had enough then wait time in between to go, oh yeah, no, I fancy playing that again, and it gave you a little kick back in. Although I've seen a fair amount of complaints, and I've even had a couple of mates who are playing it, so I have a bit of a moan about how they are patching and readjusting a lot of the elements in the game as they go, nerfing certain builds to the point of redundancy, which I can totally understand the frustration around that. But also, I just don't really care, because I don't think I don't think it'll make much difference to me in how I play the game. But if you are trying to maximize every stat of your build and play almost competitively, then sure, that's going to wind you up. But I'm sure by the time I get to play the seasonal content, the rebalancing will hopefully have largely leveled itself out a bit. But yeah, I think the trouble is, if it was on the Switch, I'd be playing it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, but at the moment it's struggling. I can't believe there's talk of is the PS5 Pro around the corner? I'm I barely feel like I've touched my PS5.
Yeah, I fully agree. Do you know what I've played on the Switch?
Vampire Survivors.
I feel like this game has been covered to death at this point, because it was a huge hit when it came out. You played and loved it for several weeks worth of podcast coverage. Yeah. Back when it was a bit more contemporary.
80 hours I put into it on the Steam Deck.
Yeah, but I finally got into Vampire Survivors in earnest because it came to the Switch. The Switch port is only a few weeks old at this point. This is now vying for one of my games of the year, if only on a technicality, because it's only recently come to the platform. I know it came out the tail end of last year, but, we can play fast and loose with those sort of rules.
Yeah.
I think I probably mentioned back when you first brought it up that I had bought it on Steam, basically, when it first launched, because I'd read about it somewhere, and then I held off playing it initially because I'm always fearful of leaping into anything as zeitgeisty as Survivors became quite quickly. But then when you really got into it, alongside at least half of our Discord, I thought, I'll give it a go. But for whatever reason, I really bounced off it. I just didn't click with it for some reason at the beginning. I don't know why. It just felt a little imprecise, maybe a bit too slow in the early stages, sometimes a bit unfair because I didn't really know what I was doing. And it made me really sad that so many were into it, because I was like, I think I'd like this, and it's just not doing it for me, and that really upsets me sometimes. But with the dust pretty much settled on that whole early swirl of popularity, it drops on the Switch. It's £3 for the game and basically every DLC pack. And I picked it up again because I thought, let's try it again. Have not put it down. It's been out for, I think the Switch says I've just hit 10 days and I've played it for 35 hours.
That's
and
insane
for me,
for you.
That's ridiculous. Yeah. I don't know what's different. I don't know what's different, because the basics of it are the same as they were, and they're pretty hard not to enjoy once you're even semi-invested, because no matter who you are, it's just a constant dopamine hit of popcorn enemies.
Yeah.
And that's fun. You've got a seemingly infinite tick list of goals to accomplish. That's fun. It's naturally addictive stuff. And it comes from a developer really understanding what makes modern mobile games such time sinks, but creating something that is less cynical and much more rewarding, because it's incredibly low cost. There's nothing to drive you towards microtransactions if you're playing it on the PC or the Switch or anything like that. So the purchase is the purchase and the joy is the joy. And It is a joy. It's an absolute joy. Like, outside of the universally understood and praised bits of the game that ensnare everybody, you've got so many elements that appeal more specifically to me. Like, it has a really punk as fuck click and play aesthetic. Like, it looks like dog shit, but I really love that.
Yeah. Like, also, let's just even though it does look like dog shit, like graphically, it's insane that it's running on the Switch. Given how many things are going on at one time.
It's bananas. Like, the way that everything is weirdly scaled, all the sprites are slightly mismatched, but like you say, it's the volume of everything. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous game. I love the soundtrack. Like, the more I've played it, these tracks are looping for 30 minutes at a time. Like, minute and a half tracks are looping for 30 minutes. Not bored of them. A lot of them, I don't know how many people pick up on it. They're really referencing the Mega Drive and its sound chip quite heavily in a lot of places. And most specifically, there's a later special stage, which, for anyone that's not got there yet, I'm not going to spoil. It's a real treat, though. But it made me feel utterly vindicated that my initial thought that it was giving Sega vibes was spot on, because it's like direct reference to a lot of Sega stuff. You know, you've also got, beyond that, all these ingrained references and little genre winks and nudges that really reward having like some level of games literacy, which means that every time I play, I sort of zone in and out of the on-screen action, because that's kind of what you're supposed to do. But I'm simultaneously thinking about all the inspiration that has gone into making this such a juicy game because of the lineage of games it's drawing from. I think, as much as Dadish was the contrast to Zelda, this has a very clear link to Diablo and any number of other loot-driven action RPGs. Yeah. Because it's all about constant equips and pickups, obviously. There's links to the Musou games like Dynasty and Hyrule Warriors, because there's a billion enemies on screen. I wonder if there's also a half reference to kind of Earth Defense Force, in the way that the game is all about total excess to the knowing and almost purposeful detriment to performance. Because the Earth Defense Force was very much like, the game isn't running very well, and it's like, don't care. More ants, please. More ants. And then you've got things like this roguelites in the game's singular instanced runs and character builds. And very specifically, I feel like they must have loved The Binding of Isaac because of how the game works with synergies and unfolding unlocks and lore and all this stuff that is done better in this than I've seen in other games that have gone on to copy this. Because it's now like a genre on its own, this kind of survivor thing. Then you've got idle games like Clicker Heroes, because the way for every goal, the goal of every build is essentially to become self-sustaining and self-harvesting. Yeah. You know, which should absolutely appeal to our good friend Minty if he's not already playing alongside fatherhood duties, because I think he loves that sort of stuff, doesn't he? Yeah. He loves numbers going up.
He plays Vampire Survivors on his phone.
Well, there we go. Of course he does. And I bet he loves it.
It was him that got me onto it.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't paying attention.
Just cut that.
Yeah. Going further back, though, then you've got stuff, again, it appeals to me really clearly. You've got asteroids, I think, in the early games, sort of avoid them up gameplay. Then you've got bullet hell cave style shooters in the dying seconds of a 30-minute run, when you're desperately trying to offset damage dealt by enemies to damage that you're dealing at the same time, sort of just hoping the bars sort of wobble in the middle and don't fall off. There's even, I think, and this is far more niche, really clear allusions, I think, to the bump combat of the Ease franchise, that RPG franchise. I played the first game years back and really liked it. But in that, you're just walking into enemies to attack them. And as long as your health points are higher than theirs, they die and you don't. And that's essentially a Vampire Survivors run when you're kitted out with something like Garlic or Song of Mana. You know, that's what they do, isn't it? You're just blasting through shit. It absolutely plays on that. And I just really like it. I can't believe the game is made by a team of like 3 core people. As well. Like, I know they've used a revolving cast of kind of fans and friends that have pitched in sprites or music or translations or flavour text or whatever. But the core team, the keepers of Vampire Survivors at Poncle, have made an astonishing thing with no real, like, direct thing to build from. Yeah. Like I said, there's a lot of references in there, but it's not like they looked at game A and said, well, if we just put Hat on it, we can make this game B. They've made something that feels quite unique, even though it's drawing from a lot of different sources. It's really inspiring to me that the game is making such insane revenue, because it's really deserved. It's really deserved. For anyone that hasn't played it and owns a platform that it's launched on, so mobile, PC, console, Switch, whatever, just get it bought. Like I said, it's like £3-4.
£3. Yeah.
You can't even buy a Happy Meal for that at McDonald's. And the Switch port, like you've referenced, if anyone knows even a little bit about how computer hardware works, this is every bit as much an impossible port as The Witcher 3 running on the Switch.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And it doesn't look it, of course, but if you understand what it's doing in the background, this team knows their onions. They really do. And when the game was doing gangbusters on Steam, everyone was baying for a Switch port. And they sort of held back and said, yeah, there's a lot of hype at the moment, and that probably would have been the smart choice to get it out then. But waiting until they'd rewritten the whole game engine and optimised everything and there was more content and all that sort of thing, that was the right choice. It was
absolutely.
They went the right route. And I hope it sells another 1 billion copies.
Yeah.
I really do. In one special stage I played yesterday, I became so overpowered that the collision detection stopped working.
Brilliant.
I accidentally wandered through a wall and then just died in a sort of floating limbo because I couldn't move, but the enemies could move towards me.
Brilliant.
So that's 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10.
Absolutely.
One of the best games I've ever played.
It's extraordinary. Like have you tried any of the co-op mode? Because that's new for the Switch version. I'm
I can't wait.
really desperate to do that. We should do that when I see you next. That'd be so fun.
For sure.
Especially if we just do it with the two Joy-Cons just on the Switch screen, in split screen or whatever, however it works. That would just be absolutely ludicrous.
For sure.
So, despite having Diablo 4 running on my Steam Deck, I was still finding myself just wanting to play games on my Switch, especially in the evenings on the sofa, for a few reasons. Chiefly, Diablo 4 is a constantly online game, and it means I can't easily pick up and put down the Steam Deck if I'm multitasking. Secondly, I forgot just how fucking loud the Steam Deck is.
It ramps up, doesn't it, when you're playing something like that?
The fans are quite deafening. I left Diablo installing overnight with the deck plugged in next to my bed, and I woke up the next morning and I was like, oh, it's installed, let me give it a test. So I just sat in bed, booted it up, and the noise of the deck sent my poor little spouse mouse of a wife scurrying for her life because she probably thought the house was taking off into the sky. Even though the Steam Deck is obviously significantly more powerful than the Switch is still just so much more comfortable to play. Yeah. And it's got the OLED screen as well. So I was looking for some pick up and play games on the Switch that I could chip away at, and nice bit of synergy. Whilst I was talking to you about Vampire Survivors when I was playing that, you told me about Brotato.
I did, and
while you're playing Vampire Survivors now, I decided that it would be an ideal thing to chip away at, and that is Brotato.
Yay!
Again, it's cheap as chip. I'm not even making the chip puns on the potato things, but it is cheap as it's cheap as chips as well, and it is. Yeah, it's a Vampire Survivors alike game. I don't know which one came first, actually, but obviously...
I think Vampire Survivors did.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, like you said, it's the Zeitgeist subgenre. Fortunately, Brotato is... I say fortunately, for what I was looking for, it's a lot more streamlined and simplistic than Vampire Survivors, because I didn't really fancy getting sucked into another 100-hour deep metagame of endless bullet heaven. But there is so much to do in Brotato, and a lot of variety in its pretty basic setup. I mean, the basic thing is you're a potato, you're armed with weapons, trying to fight through waves of enemies. Killing enemies gets you XP and currency, which you then spend in between runs to buy more weapons and abilities and upgrade your build. There aren't official synergies like there are in Vampire Survivors or Binding of Isaac, but there are definitely combinations and builds to aim for that you'll discover.
Yeah.
And that will constantly change as well as you play as different characters, which have different starting stats and characteristics, which means it's always forcing you to play in a different way and embrace a different side of the game. There are tons of characters to unlock, and then you also need to beat the game on 5 different difficulty settings with each character if you're going for, that level of completion. And beating is reaching wave 20 and killing a boss, but there's also an endless mode as well for added longevity. It's just really fun. It's really fun. It's quicker to do a run of Brotato than it would be to do Vampire Survivors, but you're looking at probably 15, 20 minutes for a run. But it's really good. It's, like I said, it's really cheap. It's really fun. It's got a fun art style. It runs really nicely on the Switch. It's also got adjustable accessibility options. So if you're finding it too tough, you can turn down like the difficulty to do things. And if you just want to just get that dopamine hit, but it's also got the challenge there if you want it. I highly recommend. I bought it twice because you very kindly gifted it to me on Steam, but I wanted it on the Switch, but
that's
it's
fine.
like
That's fine.
£4, so no harm done really. And and that's been nice. That's been really nice. What else have you played?
Well, stepping back and carrying on a bit from what I mentioned with Dadish, I could tell in the summer that I was in a bit of a game funk, because every time I booted up a console or my Steam Deck in the summer, there was a pretty solid chance I'd scroll my library for a bit and then just play Tetris.
Yeah.
And that generally means my brain's not maybe in the best place. I played a fair amount of Tetris 99, not necessarily to unlock any new skins, as it's been a while since Nintendo have rolled out any new promotional dressings for the game, though I imagine Super Mario Wonder will probably have one.
Oh, yeah.
But it's just because 99 is something I can play and enjoy basically whatever the mood, whatever the weather. Like in that time, I've won a few more rounds. I've come second or third, what feels like about 200 times. But it doesn't really matter. It never feels frustrating. Just as when I win, it doesn't even feel that great anymore. It's just Tetris 99 feels the best Tetris to me. In the hand, it feels the nicest. It's a bit snappier than most of its siblings. It's the little things, like it's probably a few frames quicker in rotation. And stuff like that makes it feel more urgent and immediate. And it's just my hands press a button and it does a thing and it makes me feel good. Like a largely unsung part of this game as well is the behind-the-scenes wizardry the developers at Eureka performed that basically completely nullifies unintended D-pad inputs on the Switch. Because if you're playing with a Pro Controller, people have complained, rightly so, to be honest, about the quality of the D-pads on the Switch for its Pro Controllers. They're just a bit spongy. They're not as good as or accurate as they should be. And it's not uncommon to play a game like a fighting game, say, or an old arcade game, and get sort of unintended diagonals, and it makes everything feel a bit more mushy. Yeah. And in this game, Tetris 99, there is literally a toggle in the menu that just says, do you want that to not happen? And and whatever they're doing works, and it never feels like it's eating inputs it shouldn't. It just feels really responsive. Yeah. For me, it's less of a problem because I'm a hardcore weenie. I've taken apart both my pros. I've performed small tweaks to the D-pads to mitigate that by blocking areas of the sensors. Like, I wanted to play Tetris properly. But to be honest, that menu option in 99, I think should be freely available to every developer making a 2D action game, because I've rarely played a round of Tetris 99 on any controller and made a mistake that I'd say wasn't my fault. You know, if I've pressed the wrong button and dropped the piece at the wrong time, it's not because the D-pad made me do it.
I want it to be my decision.
Use the sausage as a breakwater. Outside of Tetris 99, I've also sampled a few further afield Tetris titles, mainly to give me goals to work for via their RetroArch integration with the website Retro Achievements. So it's quite fun to work through a game like that. Tetris DS was always a classic Tetris entry. Really love that game. Developed by Nintendo in-house. And, you know, because of that, it had a huge swathe of modes that referenced Nintendo franchises and Nintendo characters, and it all had kind of Nintendo set dressing. It's been a lot of fun relearning and then reconquering some of those modes that are a little bit more niche. Playing the game emulated on the Steam Deck is good fun as well, because it looks nice, scaled up, and for the most part, the touchscreen modes work quite nice as well with the console's touchscreen. Like, it's different because the Steam Deck obviously has a capacitive touchscreen rather than the old stab-away resistive touchscreen that the DS has. But for the type of inputs I've needed to use, it's felt pretty decent. So everything's popping along nicely. The Nintendo theming in Tetris DS still keeps it way up the list for me in terms of Tetris ranking as well. And looking back at the game with the benefit of hindsight, it's also a real classic because of how it normalised so many of the tweaked mechanics like ghost pieces or hold pieces or rotation behaviour that are now pretty much the established Tetris canon rule set that is used in everything. So if you play a Tetris game on a touchscreen version or right through to a Tetris Effect, it's using essentially the same rule set now. It's good. Tetris 99. It's a classic. I've also, on the other end of the scale, for not quite so good, played a decent throw of V Tetris on the Virtual Boy. Again, obviously emulated. Aside from being red, this is not that far removed from vanilla Tetris on the Game Boy. Though it does have one weird mode in particular that I've not really wrapped my head around, where the board scoots either left or right after every drop. And it's essentially creating like a double width well. You can only see half of it at a time, but every time you make a drop, it slides over. And I think on the original 3D hardware for the Virtual Boy, you could kind of see the second half of your board behind the area you were working with. But that's kind of lost a bit when it's flat emulation. But the principle's kind of there, I guess. But I wouldn't really recommend that if you're looking for a Tetris game, unless you want severe red eye strain and a mode that doesn't really work that well. It's pretty low down the list. Finally, on the Tetris challenge page, a 2-for-1. I played the plain old Tetris and slightly more exotically titled Megatris for a console called the Uzebox. That's UZE box. And this was emulated, but slightly different to my other Tetris forays, because these editions have been created for the Uzebox, which is a console that does not exist.
Right.
It fits alongside similar projects like the Pico 8, so it's like a fantasy console that's got kind of deliberately modest, imagined hardware specs that developers go, I would like to explore these virtual machines to encourage my creativity through limitation.
Yeah, it's the 5 obstructions, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know if straight Tetris clones really show that much creativity. Both games play reasonably well on this sort of NES era hardware. And I did get all of the associated retro achievements in both games. So, Master of Tetris on the Uzebox, I suppose. What else have you played on your consoles?
Well, another pick up and play game that I was turned on to by our good friend Casper is Tents and Trees, which is a logic puzzle game.
It's a nice one. It's nice.
It's lovely. It's lovely. It's sort of a cross between Picross, Minesweeper, Sudoku. It's that sort of thing. It's really beautifully made. It's on the Switch, and I got it in a sale for like about 50p, but it's worth it for full price, to be honest. It's just really, really well made. Like, it's got lovely smooth animations and graphics and user interface. It's also got surprisingly nice music in it as well. We're talking about like nice looping music. Like these tracks aren't long, and there's not many of them, but I was really enjoying it. Like all the best logic puzzle games, it's pretty simple with a few basic rules. I'm not going to try and explain them because I'm crap at doing that, but basically there's a grid with a bunch of trees in different squares. Each tree needs to have one tent next to it on its cardinals, but tents can't touch the 8 squares around other tents. There are numbers on the left and top of the grid denoting how many tents are in each row and column, and then through process of elimination you work out where the tents go. That's it, I think.
Yeah,
I mean, if you follow that,
solid.
Well done. There are tons of levels of increasing size and difficulty, including levels with numbers missing from the sides of the grid, meaning you have to work extra hard to figure out where the tents go through combinations of other rules. I know you gave it a bit of a go, and you were convinced that there were times when you had to just guess where tents go,
like
and never the case. Never the case. But that's the beauty of it. Like, there are times in Picross where you're like, well, I just got to guess now, but you'll have missed something. And there have definitely been times where it's taken me several minutes to spot where my next move needs to go. And, I'm still learning new patterns and things to look out for to help solve things quicker. But I've also just discovered that there's a mobile version of the game as well, which is free to play. And it's got even more content in there, like specifically vertically designed levels fit for phones.
One-handed, hello.
That's the dream. One thumb. Portrait mode. It is free, and you can pay to get rid of ads, or you can pay to buy more coins in the game. Then you need to unlock more levels. Like, just playing the game gives you quite a lot of coins to unlock a lot of things, but I have reached a cusp now where I'm like, well, now I'm not getting enough coins and I have to watch ads to get it. So I decided to pay for a like £10 worth of coins. So I'm hoping that is... I mean, I don't think I'm going to need to watch ads for a very long time. With that amount of coins, and it's certainly worth the money for that. I've got my wife into playing it as well, and she's enjoying it. I highly recommend it on either the Switch or mobile. It's brilliant. It's and I don't say this lightly. It's my favourite logic puzzle game since Minesweeper Genius, which was also a certified yes of a game. Is another brilliant one. So yeah, a real pleasant surprise. Very, very well made. Very nice game.
I should go back to it because I did enjoy it. You know, I reached that kind of sticking point, like I said, where I felt I was having to guess, and it's likely, as you said, that I missed something or didn't kind of observe one of the rules I should have to kind of fill the gaps more logically. So I should pick it up again. It's sat on the home screen of my Switch. You know, I've literally played Vampire Survivors, and this was probably the game before it on the Switch. So it's not that far to move my cursor one icon over and select it. But yeah, it's a good game. I would equally recommend it. I haven't played the mobile one, but maybe that would get me into it a little bit more if it was a bit more convenient in that sense rather than on the Switch.
It's become my in-bed game now.
Yeah.
Slowly usurping Tomb Raider Reloaded, which is still going.
Oh, I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah.
Do you know what else I played?
Yes, New Star GP.
You don't know that though, for the context of this.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I put it in the newsletter though, so fuck it.
Might have. No. What else have you played?
I've played New Star GP.
Oh, is that from New Star Games? New Star Soccer, etc. Brilliant. I haven't played this yet.
It's been a hot minute since New Star Games have last dropped one of their immediate sports classics. But quite recently, I think within the last month, New Star GP launched in early access on Steam. And as with all their games, it is a New Star take on a sport, in this case Formula One racing. And it appealed to me almost immediately, not because I have any affinity whatsoever for any professional motorsports, but because its visuals are modelled after virtua racing.
Yeah,
doesn't take much to sell me with chunky, flat-shaded polygons. Now, I can group pretty much all New Star Games releases into 3 pools, which are the Outstanding pool, which houses New Star Soccer, sitting alone, hovering several feet above its peers. You have the Pretty Great pool, which contains games like Retro Goal, New Star Manager, some of the other kind of lesser-known ones. And then you have the Games I Haven't Played pool, which is things like New Star Cricket and Baseball, because as much as I'm sure those games are pretty solid, I've never installed them because I don't care about the sports they're based on.
Yeah.
Not into bat and ball sports, to be honest, I'm afraid. Already, though, a couple hours into the as-of-yet unfinished career mode, because like I said, it's early access, New Star GP is sitting pretty comfortably alongside Retro Goal, and those in the middle tier as being pretty bloody great. I think it's going to be a banger. In the career mode, you're competing and completing in a number of racing events across each track in the racing calendar. So for each one, you've got time trials, you've got last man standing races, you've got full grid races, that sort of thing. And you're earning money to upgrade your vehicle, make social decisions a la New Star Soccer or Manager to placate the different members of your racing team. And the loop of racing gameplay and then team and car management is predictably, as with all their games, really addictive. But it's all made more successful as well by this game actually having a really great handling model. I think it's probably the most fully sort of fleshed out game that New Star Games have made. It doesn't feel just like a quick kind of arcadey thing. It's much more nuanced in terms of how the handling feels. So you race around, you've got a proper need for pit strategy and race plans and a pleasing level of difficulty. It's not hard, at least in the early season, but it's still easy enough to misjudge a corner, spin out, and then find it really tough to catch the pack. So you'll want to restart and get a better time and do better. Pitting is about maintaining your fuel, but also about tyre choice. So there's other things to consider. Like the game's got a semi-dynamic weather system, and there is a real tangible difference in handling as well. There's a real tangible difference in handling as well as tyre degradation and things like that if you're driving, say, using wet tyres but on a dry course. So it's not simmy to the point where you're tweaking the internal differentials of the engine or anything stupid like that. Yeah. But it does add a layer of strategy that arcade racers usually don't have, which kind of sets it a little bit apart from its peers as well. So I think it does appeal in a way that I think there's a gap in the market that they've quite successfully pushed into. Like I said, it's not finished yet. It's really clear in its store page that it's not yet finished. So it's not like a bait and switch thing. But I have no doubt in my mind that it will be a great game and that it will only improve as the developer continues to take feedback on board and kind of rounds out the GP career mode and other bits and bobs. It does promise as well to come to the consoles comes to consoles in the future. So a Switch Double Dip is probably round the corner. But for now, playing either handheld or docked on the Steam Deck, it's already pretty good. It runs really, really nicely. I love that there are now multiple retro-themed modern racing games doing the rounds, and all of them are great. Like, it really is good. Like, if you want something that leans more towards old Amiga, sort of fast racers like Turbo Esprit, you've got Horizon Chase Turbo, basically a like-for-like sort of experience of that. If you want something that's essentially straight-up virtual racing worship, but chucked in a blender with Mario Kart, you've got Hot Shot Racing. If you want something a bit more like the old MS-DOS microprose racers that I definitely remember playing on my friend Kieran's PC when I was about 8, you've got New Star GP. It kind of fits that mold. Kieran! All I really need now is something modern that captures the thrill I get from Sega Rally. And I'd say almost every prong of retro racing I enjoy is pretty much covered. So until that day, I'll just keep emulating the Saturn version and having a great time.
Absolutely. Right, one last thing I'm going to talk about is it's also the most recent game that I've played, and that is Blasphemous 2, which came out last week, a couple of weeks ago.
I did not know, 1, I think it was in development, and 2, that it came out, and 3, that you've presumably played 100 hours in the last week.
Well, no, but I have played it to completion. I always knew it was going to be a day one game for me. I love the original. Incredible combat and Metroidvania exploration, coupled with outrageously, gorgeously grim pixel art, aesthetic design.
Yeah.
Deeply gory, religious torture tones resonate very deeply. I love it.
Torture tones is a good word.
And that's all back in this sequel and refined with more crunchy combat, unbearably satisfying abilities that will make you wince and churn your stomach. It's so good. There are some new mechanics at play here as well, which are really exciting, namely having a few different weapons to choose from, and you pick a starting weapon out of a lineup of like 3 choices, but you'll then find the others in the course of your adventure. But not only do these offer 3 very different combat styles and abilities, but they are also key to solving various different puzzles and roadblocks that you'll encounter too, which means that, depending on which weapon you start with, you're going to have to go through the game in quite a different way, which is a great way of lending versatility to the game. Certainly encourages, repeat playthroughs and all of that. One thing I will say, the game is a lot shorter than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Like, I know sequels tend to go bigger and more expansive, and this isn't necessarily a good thing. And this game is a lot tighter than the first game. Like, all the fat has been trimmed, and it's much more focused and refined, which makes for a more satisfying experience. But also, it kind of reaches the end with a feeling that there was still an extra gear change to be had.
Yeah.
And like, I don't know if that's because they're holding content back for DLC. Like, I've never played the original game's DLC. I think there were like at least 3 packs for that, which probably doubled the content of the base game across them all. So it's possible that we'll see more, but I definitely only want more of, this quality, not just more for the sake of more. Like maybe another weapon to add into the mix, like a ranged weapon, maybe some cross-weapon combos that factor in changing between the weapons mid-attack. More of the betwixt attacks, more of the brilliantly challenging platforming sections. But like the game's world is just, it's great to hang out in, all of its profound absurdity. Like, one of the biggest challenges in the game is just figuring out what the fuck anyone is actually on about. Like, working out what's what, because everything will have an overly epic religious or Latin-infused name. So, like, your checkpoints are Prie Deus, or, like, to upgrade your health, you need to find silver-clad crystal shards, ornate chalices, and your magic meter is it's not called magic, it's called fervour. Your spells are called prayers, and your prayers are split into chants and verses, and it's like, it's sometimes a bit of a battle just to remember what everything is when it's being referred to in the game. That's very much a me problem. It's all really good fun, and the beauty of it being a bit of a shorter game is that it is a bit easier to keep track of all of that stuff. I'm not sure if I'll do a repeat playthrough, start off with a different weapon, but I'll certainly keep an eye out for DLC for it. I did actually briefly revisit the first game, and I was quite surprised at the amount of stuff and features that are in the first game that I'd forgotten about that didn't make it into Blasphemous 2, because there are definitely elements that I think would have worked really well in the sequel, but they just haven't been there. It's almost like I said, they've trimmed the fat, but maybe they've trimmed a bit of the meat too. I don't know. We'll see. It's great. It's really good. It was a harsh carving. It was, yeah. It had all the precision of the work experience guy at Toby Carvery.
Yeah. You're getting a very thin piece.
Can I have a bit of all three, please?
A very thin piece and a very thick piece.
Yeah. Thanks, Tristan. No tip for you. Where's the salad bar?
I'm into Toby in ages. Even as a vegetarian, just like a big plate of potatoes. Like, it's still pretty satisfying.
You love it.
Oh.
The other day we'd had dinner and I FaceTimed my dad, and my dad said, to Nora, and said, what have you had, what did you have for dinner? She just went, gravy. Gravy and peas.
That's a Georgia dinner, that is.
Yeah, also, peas weren't in her dinner, so...
Or gravy.
Or gravy. She had a pizza. No, she didn't. Right, let's wrap this up. Let's try and get this done before an hour.
Well, we haven't done that, have we?
It was 55 minutes.
I thought we were further. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Do you want to know the final game, pretty much, that I played in the holiday, and the final game that I beat in the holiday?
Oh, yes, please.
Plants vs. Zombies. The almost
finally
2-year-long Plants vs. Zombies campaign that me and my brother have been fighting to is finally finished.
Jeez.
The final survival mode achievement was vanquished as
That's
the last
insane.
time we hung
Well
out
done.
in summer. And doing that, you get the Alive and Planting trophy. It's awarded for getting through 40 waves of the survival mode. And it's brutal, but it has fallen. You know, back in the Xbox 360 days, me and my brother, both still living at home then, because this was a long time ago, worked together to beat Plants vs. Zombies on the Xbox, and Alive and Planting was the final achievement we unlocked then. And now, well over a decade later, Alive and Planting is the final trophy we unlocked on our PS3 run. And it was just really nice to do together. Every time me and brother Tom have hung out over the last year and a half, we have played at least a bit of Plants vs. Zombies. And the story mode went down reasonably easy. You know, we've beaten it a fair few times. It's not that hard. And we took turns basically level or lifing it, you know, to get through the whole thing. And that's really nice. The old classic couch co-op with your pals or your brothers. And we hacked through the main adventure. That was fine. We beat most of the bonus modes in an afternoon, you know, well over 12 months ago at this point. But the final Endless Survival has taken so fucking long. So long. Like, a successful run to do the whole thing, even if you're a wizard at this game, is probably about 2 hours long. And we have tried and failed, not hyperbole here, 20, 30, 40 times. Like,
Jesus.
Every time we've hung out, we give it a go, and every time we failed. For the first 24 attempts, we were convinced we were just going to use our own big brains, like our own strategic nous. But every time we'd hit that wave 10 and then just fall apart. We'd have a system that was working, then we'd just blow it and it would fall apart. So we thought, right, let's soften the blow. We'll allow ourselves a little peek at a video online, and we'll try and internalise just some of the strategy, and then we'll do it. And we started consistently getting into the teens, which felt like progress, but would still falter every single time. And after too many failed attempts and wasted days, literal wasted days to count, we finally gave in. We watched through a whole guide and then tried to put what we'd seen into strategic practice. And even cheating, it took another 10 attempts.
Cheating? That's not cheating.
Well,
for a start.
To be able to look at something that has worked and replicate it almost to the minute.
Oh, yeah, no, good point, actually.
I thought that would be it. And no, it's not. There's too many random elements. It's just so hard. And it's made infinitely harder by the fact that beyond the first handful of waves, again, I'm not joking, the PlayStation 3 version drops to single-digit frame rates consistently. And the Xbox version did not when we played that. The PC version that I've toyed with on my laptop does not. The Vita version did not. But the PS3 version of my beloved Plants vs. Zombies does not run well. It just does not run well. In the late game, Tom would frequently be shouting, "Where is my cursor?" The screen would fill with so many enemies, and the cursor would be moving literally like every second. It might skip somewhere else. And it was so hard to see what you were planting and where you could put a lane emptying chili bomb. It was a real hard time, but I'm very, very happy to have this one licked. It's still probably the best tower defense game I've ever played, though I imagine it will be a fair old while before I revisit it again. I think that's done. I think that is done, to be honest.
So I'm just tracing a potato.
Classic.
That is my way. You can sit there, Mr. Potato. This. Right. So there we go. That is what we've been playing over the last couple of months. What have you been playing? Not you. I've literally just found out what you've been playing. The audience.
Again, if you want.
Don't. The listeners, what have you been playing? Tell us. Tell us. Come join us in the Discord. Go to o3c.games and click the join button. You can chat to us there. Tell us what you've been playing. Or you can chat to us on social media. We are at O3C Games on everything. Do make sure you follow, like, subscribe, retweet, rethread, X, TikTok. What do you do? I don't know. We're on everything, and we're posting everything to everything. Just follow everything. Like us. I've said that. Give us a rating on your podcast platform.
That
Give
helps.
us a ranking. Yeah, subscribe to it. All these things help. Tell a friend. That would be great. That would be great. We can keep doing shit then. I'm on Twitter as well. Well, I can't even bother to do those anymore. You can chat to me on social media. I'm at Jonathan Dunn on things. I think I'm on at Jonathan Dunn 2046 on Instagram or something.
Lovely.
Chat to me there if you want, or chat to me on the Discord.
I pretty much only use Twitter, even though I hate it. I'm using it out of hate now. Chaz_Hodges, still the same.
And do make sure you subscribe to our newsletter, because we'll be giving you weekly updates between now and the next episode. If you've got an idea of what you'd like us to do this season, then we're all ears. This is a good time to get your 3 cents in. Yeah. Tell us what you want, and we might do it. But we're going to aim to be back in a month's time, and certainly catch you up and each other up in what we've been playing. A little teaser. I've been playing Sea of Stars.
Oh, that pretty one.
You don't want to miss out. Fuck knows. Right.